Sat Shri Akal, I'm Attar.
Hi, I'm Maneesha.
Welcome to our podcast, Two Best Friends, where us two best friends talk about everything and anything that relates to millennial, brown, migrant women living in another country and navigating our life and motherhood and everything.
Yes, everything. And here we are today.
Yet again.
Yet again. And today's topic is something
very personal, I feel, to every woman that we stand for as a migrant, as a mother, as a homemaker, working woman, the feeling of having imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so feeling like a fraud sometimes.
Yes, behrupia. So anyone whose English is not the first language, imposter syndrome is something that everybody feels, but can't really put the finger on as to what it is. So in layman's term, when you feel like, oh, you got here by luck, or this is not where you belong, or should you be deserving this, or you don't deserve to be in this space, or you haven't really earned the right to be here. So anything, the self-doubt is actually the imposter feeling or the syndrome.
Yeah. And it's generally also when you are in spaces which you've actually got in or done, but you kind of question yourself in that space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think me and Atha spoke about it. हमें लगा कि, we experienced that a few times, and I think kind of talking about it deeper. But before we go into that, let's do our silver lining of the week.
Yeah. You go first, Mona.
Thanks, Atha. My silver lining actually was over the weekend. It was good Melbourne weather, I would say, because it was actually sunny on a Sunday. Yeah,
I
Sunday.
don't remember.
Well, it was cold, but it was sunny, and which is in winter or autumn in Melbourne, it's a beautiful feeling because otherwise it's generally rainy and cloudy. So we actually went to the city and we made a day out of it, all four of us. And I hadn't been to Victoria Market for a very long time.
Yeah.
Because I just find it to be, I prefer going more local.
Yeah, no.
Yes,
QB
because
is very, I feel like overhyped.
Yes, it is quite. I think it's more if you're traveling to Melbourne and you want to see something, it's great. But anyways, we went in and we did a few things, did ice skating, and then in the end ended up because our car was parked at Big Market. Actually walked around and there were so many people, but it was a really good feeling because um I think that's the only place in Melbourne where I feel like I can still bargain. Nobody else. Like the Indian in me comes out and like, okay, how much? $33. I'm like, no, $20. And you can do that without feeling an ounce of shame because otherwise I feel like
I've not come across
really?
bargaining.
Oh my god.
I thought the prices were fixed.
No, well, they're not. But anyway, so we got to do it and it was just fun. Not all the places, but there were some. And I met this really old gentleman who sold me these opal earrings. He was so cute. He's like, do you have cash? I'm like, he's like, I'm pretty old school. And then when I got the earring, he's like, take care of them. If you take care of them, they'll go on for years. And he was so
He was pressure of looking after them.
But he was so beautiful the way he was expressing his love for his earrings. Like it looked like he made them by himself. Right. It was very heartfelt. And I feel like you don't get that as much anymore. It's very it's made in another it's just made in a factory and something like that. And it was a nice feeling to have that. So that was my silver lining. Just going around and meeting someone who loved what they did and was selling it with love.
Very nice. My silver lining is yet again around my son. So the other day he wanted to buy this VR something. I can't explain because I didn't even understand. So he was like, Mom, I've got this much money saved up and I'm going to buy it. And I was like, oh, okay, I can't even question it because it's your money. You've saved up.
Yeah.
But he was giving me a figure which was $100 less than what it actually was. And I'm like, out of curiosity, why are you telling me 100 less figure? You've actually got this much money.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he's like, no, that's for you to keep.
That is so cute. बेटा अभी तो वेट कर बहुत सारे आशीर्वाद तुझे ऐसे आने
No, I know, but still it was very sweet. I mean,
that was nice to
but you must think, this much should go for mom. That was just very, very
and something
sweet.
For you. That's very nice.
His ashirwad.
His ashirwad. That's very sweet. And it's the thought.
It's the thought. Right? But I got the money.
You got the money.
I got the money.
Yes, use it for something useful for yourself.
I did say to him, I was like, how about I or your dad pitch in and we buy it for your birthday? And he's like, no, I want to buy it with my own money because it's just the satisfaction I will get. And I'm like,
wow.
Oh, he's so mature, more mature than I was at his age, or even now.
Different experiences. But no, that's beautiful. That
So
is
that was my
amazing.
silver lining.
That's very nice. Now, coming back to that feeling of, the feeling.
Lead on to that.
Yeah.
When I was feeling that, and I was like, do I even deserve that much of a love and care? Like, I really doubted. I was like, he's being such a kind son. Am I even doing what I should be doing as a mother?
There comes your.
Yeah. I was like,
Imposter syndrome
yes,
question.
yes,
Yeah.
because I questioned myself in that moment that am I doing enough? Am I doing right? I completely focused on what I wasn't doing well, what I didn't do well in the past, how I could have done better, and how I don't deserve this. And then I had to snap myself out of it. I was like, no.
And it's how interesting that comes in, right? Because I mean, from another perspective, when I see you working right now, supporting your son as a single parent, doing whatever you can. You just were explaining to me your week where you were, he has classes 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the night on weekdays. And then the next morning at 6 a.m., you're waking up and doing things. So, like, when I see it and hear it, I'm like, man, you're doing a lot like any other. But it's funny how that question comes in saying, am I doing enough? Because I think it's like, I'm pretty sure you're doing more than enough.
I still don't think so. I feel like the constant feeling of, do I deserve it? I don't think I deserve this. And I always have this feeling that I lucked out somehow. This is not what I should have, or I deserve it, but I just lucked out.
Do you also think that's because of our South Asian upbringing?
100%.
Because there is almost, I think, growing up, and not growing up, but also now, as in that there's a lot of high standards around how we do things.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a lot of silence around our feelings around that, right? Like, I know we're trying to question that silence, but there is a silence about how the vulnerability of things, right? Actually, like, it's bloody overwhelming. Are you saying it? No, you just keep pushing it and keep doing things. Keep your house right. Keep your, life right. There's a lot of.
Do you know, it be in the movies, growing up, seeing in the movies, watching our parents, watching everyone around you, being a martyr as a woman is what makes you a real woman. And when you're not being that, then that's when imposter syndrome kicks in for me. I'm not good enough because I am not actually killing myself. I'm not depriving myself of
That is
something.
such an interesting point you say that, right?
Yeah.
Because there's another thing. Well, that
But
was a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
You're right. That whole martyr
Yeah.
thing, but also because at some point, and I'm only talking from a woman lens right now, and maybe a brown woman lens, but because a lot of our older generation has 100% done it. But women who actually ask for their needs to be met are called selfish. Yeah. And being selfish is not okay in our community.
No.
And it's looked down upon, and maybe it's looked down upon for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that kicks in for me. However, I feel like I am switched on enough to realize that's just a feeling and that's the behavior that I've seen and learned, but I've sort of like refused to accept it. And then I tell myself, no, the fact is that being a martyr does not make you a greater human being. Taking care of yourself and setting a good example around you is what actually you're adding to the women around you or the generations ahead of you, because then they can see that no, you need to fill your own cup before you can pour anything out of yourself.
It is, but I feel like it is so much. It's almost like an evolution as a woman. Oh, as I feel like I struggle with that sometimes because it's like, when you do things for yourself or say it out loud, you can hear yourself and you cringe almost within yourself saying, oops, am I doing the right thing here? Yeah. And that's where the imposter syndrome comes. Like as a, our parents, or I hear a lot of older generation sometimes saying, आजकल की लड़कियां तो जो चाहती है कर लेती हैं, which also has a hidden layer of implication saying, well, you guys are selfish. Yeah. That's not okay. And that's why you end up being, the next thing is end up being divorced. Yeah. Right? And it's like, what? Yeah. Like, how is that related?
Yeah, the other factor I've seen, like this is something that I have very much distinguished myself from. The other thing that I have I'm yet to unlearn is that with the imposter syndrome, that I feel like for me is that I overcompensate. So when you tell me that I do so much, I have such long days, is because I feel like I'm not good enough, so I should earn it. And I can't boast about anything that I'm doing well or doing good. So I need to stay humble.
Yeah,
and I cannot, like, I am not good with compliments.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, what happens when somebody compliments you?
Oh my God, I will be in a corner, hidden away.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I get put
Interesting.
off by that.
So, and I just watched a show on the weekend, and it was about, it is a woman from an African American background, and she's gone into this, she's at this gallery, a creative something.
Yeah.
And the other woman actually compliments her about something. And she's like, she almost says sorry or something.
Yeah.
Or yeah, like something around, she deflects the compliment. And the woman says, when you complimented, stop saying, deflecting it, or saying sorry. Yeah. Accept it.
That's it.
But you're right. I think there is an ingrained thing about not accepting compliments.
Yes.
And I am the same because I have, and I think, of course, I think you've touched the parent part. I'm going to touch the more work part.
Yeah.
Where I feel like at work, oh my God, like, and as a psychologist now, I question myself so much, right? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing this right? And my supervisor all the time says, that wouldn't be exactly what I've done, right? He would almost be like, no, I get that you are into this space, but it is like, why? I have almost 2 decades of experience, but I still would question and I've had 8 years of study behind me, plus 20 years of, I started really young, working in mental health. So, yes, there is enough there, and life experience of being a parent, being so many hats, but you still question yourself. And you question yourself, like, well, when I'm setting up my thing, and it's almost like there is this feeling where it's like, no, someone's going to come in and question me and say, you are a fraud, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I question myself all the time, where I'm like, I'm a fraud. Am I doing the right thing? Am I not? But it's almost the way I kind of set myself in is listen to your gut.
Yeah.
And and that's it. Like, I keep going back, but the mind makes me question it all the time. It's like, it is so frustrating as well. But then I was reading somewhere as well, when you feel that imposter syndrome at some point, that means you're taking some brave steps.
Yeah.
That also means you care, because at another point of it is, is about, you actually are going to be aware of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think because being brown, being women, being migrants, especially here in this country, there's a lot of questioning
It is.
ourselves, right? Those layers make it harder to question and ask.
You're very right that it is the action taking out, like, the part of it. I will not say it to a group of people or to anybody else, but I tell this to myself when imposter syndrome kicks in, that no, you're actually very brave. Like, anytime I've questioned myself, that's followed with a decision, an action, a step, which makes me brave. I feel like deciding to do anything in my life, that decision was it was filled with strength. And I'm like, no, I have something, which is why I did this. So I'm able to bring myself back, but I don't really believe when others tell me that.
And it is, and it's
like the internal validation is more important, and I'm glad that I'm able to do that rather than relying on external validation.
I do need external validation, I would say, like, in the sense of, for me, sometimes it's a lot of talking to other people. Other people, not people I don't know, but like friends, like you guys, or speaking to my partner Ashwin now, kind of just saying, hey, what do you think? Like, also, like, I need that to be able to be like, okay, I think.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, I don't
think,
think,
definitely.
like, because my brain is only questioning my own, it's like, and then it's like, no, what, like, it's kind of that whole, like, now, for example, I'm really passionate about South Asian mental health.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm trying to establish something, a psychology practice, but then I look at all these other practices who are also doing that, and I'm like, cool, am I qualified enough to do this?
Yeah.
But it's the question, right? And I know but also like, but I'm like, oh, but I don't have the right skills. I don't have the right this thing. And you're like, but you almost have to be like, stop.
Yeah.
But it is that question of you've reached here with a lot of hard work, a lot of work,
Yeah.
a lot of study experience, but that question, I also think it's because I don't see enough, and this is only women of color in leadership or in higher spaces where I can like, okay, that could be someone as an example. Let me or mentor or I can reach out to. I don't have that.
No.
And I think that is another reason why we sometimes kind of question ourselves a bit because you're like, am I supposed to?
If you're
do
above
this?
the normal, like the standard league that you haven't seen anyone, then you're like, how come I'm there?
Yeah.
There are better people, there are better women out there.
There's a few people, but then they have their own different, privileges, and I
Yeah.
have my own. But it's that whole questioning yourself, and you always see others as having more than you. But it's that internal question of it.
And the thing is, everybody feels that. It's just about talking to each other.
Yeah.
Or feels this way.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how well established or what they've achieved. Everybody feels it.
I have a funny story about this.
Yeah.
So I've recently started Kathak.
Yeah.
Right. And one of our friends is part of that. And I personally like when she's one of those people, like, I feel like creativity and
Flows in
dance, and it's her thing, right? And I'm like, okay. So I kind of look up to her in that, right? She would have her own story about it, I'm sure, and she does. Whenever we tell her, you are like so good at this, she's like, no, nonsense. And she, she has her own imposter syndrome. Yeah. Anyway, so I have started doing Kathak, and she's there as well. And I'm like, the other day we were doing this Kathak step, right? It was pretty full on. And I think that's my imposter syndrome, is I think I'm shit at it, right? I think I don't have the grace to do it. I'm literally like jumping off and I'm like, I'm doing this show shit. Like in my head, I'm thinking, damn, I look like ridiculous doing this. But it's that thing. And I'm like, what nonsense? Like I've done this and I'm doing it. Yeah. But it's the thing of I'm not good enough in this space because I'm not good here.
Yesterday I was going like scrolling on doom scrolling on Instagram, and this woman had posted a photo, and it was a normal photo. And then in the next slide, it said, "Oh, you didn't notice my crooked teeth." And I went back and I'm like, actually, I still can't notice. Anyway, the next slide, she's like, "I bet you didn't notice my bad makeup." I went back and I'm like, but it's not bad. Anyway, she had like about 10 photos of picking the fault. At the end, she was like, we are so self-critical that nobody else notices those things. And I'm like, I am that person. I am so self-critical that it is so hard to live in my own head. Everybody's same. Every single person is exactly the same, being self-critical, living in their own head, thinking that the other person thinks they're fraud, but actually no.
Absolutely. It's like I had at work, and this is my work experience, where one of my last supervisors, my manager, he was like a man in his 70s and a lovely, lovely person who's been in this industry for like 50 years, right? And he used to say to me, saying, Maneesha, I see you being a big leader in this space, right? I know, regardless of where you are, you will. And every time he used to say that, I would in my head say, no, I don't think so. Do you really? Like the fraud, like, no, this is not real. I can't. But it is that, that kind of, you question yourself. Like and even like I have seen people younger to me or in like a different gender who've gone and done things. But every time I find I wouldn't take those steps ahead.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. In my last job, there was this position that came up, and I thought that was way out of my league. Anyway, I went for the interview and I was like, I'm sure I'm going to get turned down. There is no way they would hire someone like me. Anyway, they ended up hiring me, and I spoke to a friend of mine who was in that position before, and she was like, no, you're fine. This is for you. And you think that the people who are hiring, like the group of people who interviewed you, do you think that they don't know what's good enough for this role? I did do that stint for about like 2 years, but it was that work turned out to be sort of like so easy for me.
Yeah.
That it was so easy that every day when I was like, it was 9 to 5, by 2 p.m., when I was done with all the deadlines, all the work, and I'm like, shit, I'm missing something. I've not done something. That's why I'm free now and I shouldn't be doing this. And I lived with that. It was so prevalent. I lived with that for almost a year. I was like, I would overdo it. I would put my hand out for other tasks because I was like, shit, if they find out that I'm not doing something, and then it's going to be so bad. Anyway, after I left the work, I was still good friends with my boss then. And I did ask her, I was like, was there any mess that you had to clean up after me? Because in my head,
You was like, you were not doing
I
enough.
was not doing enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had done that in the job before that as well. That I was again very good friends with my then supervisor. And I asked her, I was like, how much of a mess I left? And she was like, actually, you didn't, the other person did. And I was like, I thought he had it together. But no.
No, and I agree. I think it's that whole self-questioning, which of course helps you do better, but also doesn't leave you satisfied and content, right? Like you're always reaching out to, and I think we've spoken about some strategies of what that means, right? Like how can you, it's the internal validation, it's also the external validation of talking to your friends and family and stuff. But also sometimes, and this happens to me when I go into a room where there are a lot of different, professionals or whatever, and it's like almost saying to yourself, I'm here and I belong.
Yeah.
Right? And it's okay. Like, because I feel like the biggest, highest, for me, imposter syndrome hits me the moment I step into a room of like all these other people who I feel like know more than I do, and I'm a fraud in that space. Like,
yeah, do you know what? Like how you feel like with the other people in the room, like maybe in your same profession. I feel that when I meet people of my own community, of my own faith, I feel like I'm such a fraud in that environment because they are so up above me. Anytime I get validated by them, it meets me with the new depth of low.
yeah.
Like I'm so low afterwards, and I'm like, how did they think I'm good? What made them think that I'm deserving of anything?
Yeah.
And then I'm met with like 10 days of like so much of criticism of myself that I'm like, oh shit, now I have to keep up with that. So up until now, I think Loki, even now, my goal in life is to be mediocre.
Yeah, I actually
Because
read
then
it. Yeah, it's about the, I don't know, I mean, I hear you saying that, but it's also kind of letting go of the perfectionism in life. But do you actually?
Don't even talk about perfectionism.
Because I hear that, but I also hear the other part of it where I don't think you can be mediocre if you're a perfectionist.
Well, that's
Sorry, I'm questioning that for you. I hear you saying that, but I think it's also about that. That's the problem is, I think, I mean, that's me. I'm not a perfect. Depends on what it is, right? There's certain things I'm like, oh, I want to get it done really nicely. But it's also at some points being okay with the fact that I got it done and that's enough.
Yes.
Rather than having it as perfect.
I think I'm getting better at that.
Yeah.
I am so getting better at that because I've learned nothing should compromise your mental health or your peace of mind in that moment. If, for example, अगर सफाई हुई है, अच्छी नहीं हुई है, that's fine, इतनी मौत नहीं आ रही है, कोई बात नहीं, अगली बार अच्छी हो जाएगी. उस पे ये करने की जरूरत नहीं कि now I have to redo it. However, I am
I can't even, same. I let go of that.
कई चीजें you have to pick a battle.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I think it comes down to.
Yeah.
However, I'd strive for the perfect. I don't know how to let go, but then when I say be mediocre, it's sort of me telling myself it's okay, let go of that.
I hear that because I'm like,
that's the contradiction I create for myself, like many others.
And I think that is quite valid, and I think it's good to be aware, right? I think that's the first step of anything. Be aware of it so you can question it. But I think just to kind of wrap up though, do you have a story? If I ask you, what was the last time you felt like a total fraud recently?
Totally. I talk about this the whole time. Like I just touched on it just now.
Yeah.
We had a big Dora. In the whole time, I felt like an absolute fraud. I felt I am just not good enough to be there. I should not be. I was given tasks that I was like, why am I doing this? I'm just not good enough. But then they wouldn't have been given to me if that was the case. But I was just feeling so strongly. But in that moment, I was in such a high. I was doing so many things that there wasn't enough time to feel it. And there were not strong actions to defy that feeling either. I continued to feel that I'm just a fraud. I'm an imposter. When are they going to hold on that she's just a facade, nothing more to it? But then afterwards, I dwelled on it so much because it was such a high that I'm like, it was hard to get out of that pit. So still sometimes I feel like it. Now I've just pushed it under the rug and I'm like, I don't want to think about that time. I don't want to think about that month. It is done, dusted. That's it.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, it was actually recently. It was in we were talking about something about we were talking about in our kids' school about something about body image and talking to the kids about different things that happen after a certain age and all of that. Interestingly, so I was kind of added into that group. Yeah. And it was so funny. I questioned myself. I'm like, I don't think I'm qualified to do this. I thought about it. And then I'm like, how did that even how? Like you have worked in gender and sexuality in India for you led a program all over the country in India when you were 22, right? Done psychology, you work with people with eating disorder, and but it's that thing, right? And I question, I'm like, how do you think? And I actually thought about it. I'm like, I don't think I'm good enough to do this, right? But I'm like, this is so weird, like how that kind of clicks in. And it's like I recognize it the moment it does, but it's still there. Yeah. It's like, oh, really? Anyway, so that was my last moment of having that thought. But sometimes I feel like it's so like it happens so often, even if it is a fleeting thought. It's part of life. It is. मतलब non-stop वो चलता ही रहता है. Yeah, and I think what that actually makes me think, and listening to you, is that we're not alone in this. No, right? No. Listening to you, I feel like, oh gosh, I feel validated. Yeah, and maybe it's that whole doing something new, or doing something that is you think is maybe you look up to or something, right? And maybe that's why being brave in a moment, is what it is, and it's okay to feel that and question it and be aware of it and keep going with it. But also, my other thing is that I've learned is don't devour yourself because of it, right? Yeah. Because that is what I feel like in the past, younger me has done. Yeah. I have taken myself for granted, or other people have taken me for granted because I have not known my worth. That is so true. It goes back to one of our episodes where we were like, we do not give ourselves enough credit. Yes. We do not hype ourselves enough. If we start to do it, even if it is once a day, give that affirmation about ourselves or remind ourselves what we've achieved, what we've done. Because I don't even like to think about what I've achieved. Let's do one now. Yes. Give me one thing that you can hype yourself about, or you did well, or you're proud of. Us, starting podcast. Yeah. We did not know anything about it. Here we are doing it. That is so true. And I've got to say, when you said it, I think I was like, I'm not creative enough. I'm not good enough. I can't sound nice. Who's going to listen to me? Right? And here we are. We're continuing on because I knew we could do the consistency and we could do it, but it was more hearing people and listening to the feedback really helps us. Like we had someone I really respect who's traveled around the world. She's in her 70s, 60s, 70s, and she sent us this thing about the one we did about India, Pakistan, and what was happening. And her feedback, it was so heartfelt. She's like, the way you've covered it about migrants and our experiences of it. And this is a woman who's worked with Japan, like with the, with radio and stuff like that. I'm like, that feels good, right? And I think that's what, if I have to say, being aware that yes, we can do it and we've done it. Yeah. And being proud of that. Yeah, that's what I mean, like being brave. Being brave. That we've done this. We will do in future anything new that comes up that's challenging, and I guess that's what it is. That's a good side of having imposter syndrome because you want to overcome it. I want to add another one that I'm really excited and quite hyped up about is me and we've kind of we've invested a few years ago. We're making a space for ourselves, like a physical cottage in India, but I'm really also kind of taking the stand to do it. Yes. I'm really because we all think about making things with our friends and creating. Yes. And we did it, and I'm really quite proud of ourselves because I think we could have easily said, no, we'll do it later. I don't have the money. Yeah. But we did it, and we're doing it. Yeah. And that's very exciting. That's what I mean. Like when we talk about it,
we talk the practicality and we put it in action.
Yeah. And it was scary. And it was like, can I do it? Can I actually get a property? And that's another woman thing as well.
Yes.
Which is beyond your shared investments with other people in life or your partners.
Yes. So anyone listening to us in India, if you want to Airbnb, yes,
we will get in touch. But anyway, so yeah, that's something to be proud about.
Yes, that is.
Because I feel like that's another ballgame. Financial decisions.
We have to do it all by ourselves.
And as women doing it, I feel like there's a big imposter, especially in India. I think even in Australia, I feel, but in India, like if you have to deal with these things, that's another level of I have felt like a fraud anytime I have to deal with any of that, right? And I think just that is another. I feel like that's another discussion, but we'll get to that point another day. But let's wrap up.
Yes.
Is there anything we can? I guess maybe asking our audience, like, what is their experience of
when do you feel like that? Something that you
feel like an imposter and say, who let me in here?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Let us know. We'd love to hear all the feedback and all the engagements and telling us your stories.
Yes. And thank you for listening in. Keep, sharing about us. We're on Spotify, Instagram, and on YouTube. And thank you for listening to us this week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.